In this video, we're going to go over some of the steps required to change out the brake pads and brake rotors on a Mark III Range Rover, model year 2003 through 2005. Now, the brakes in this vehicle are enormous, and they're actually quite dusty and squeaky from time to time, so you can save yourself a lot of money by changing the pads and rotors yourself. So for this job, we're going to need all the parts. They're laid out in front of us now. We've got some brake pads, we've got some brake rotors here, got a jack and some jack stands, got some wheel cleaner and some rubber cleaner, got some brake cleaner, which will be very important, have some penetrating oil, and we have a couple of packets of copper grease. And in this whole process, we're going to go through all the steps necessary to replace the pads. Hopefully save yourself some money. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen up those wheel nuts. We're going to loosen them up with the tire on the ground so that we can actually use the vehicle weight to prevent the tire from spinning. So just gently crack the nuts, and then we're going to jack the vehicle up. So I've completed the process of jacking up the vehicle. I used 4 jack stands, 2 on either side of the frame rails and 2 towards the front on the two-wheeler subframes. Remember, when jacking up the vehicle like this, also open at least one of the passenger doors to disable the electronic air suspension. So both wheels are now off the vehicle, and we have the brake caliper turned, the brake disc turned all the way to the left, so we can better get access to the back side of the caliper where the 16mm bolts are. And I'm probably going to have to use a breaker bar on this. Alright, to get the caliper off of the brake disc, you are going to probably need some specialized tool. So I've got a 1/2-inch breaker bar with a 16mm impact socket. I have some penetrating oil, and we're going to begin by spraying the backside of the caliper. There are 2 bolts, and we're going to spray them down with penetrating oil. I've already done that, and you got to let it set in and do its job. So now we're going to crack these bolts. You probably need a breaker bar. There we go. That one's cracked. Now the bottom one. There we go. So now I can probably finish it off with a ratchet. So now the caliper will just simply come off, and it's quite heavy. Make sure that the weight of the caliper does not pull on this brake line. And unclip it back here. And these are the brake pads, that we're going to remove next. Alright, so now we have the caliper off of the brake disc, and we can inspect the pads. Now there are 2 clips. You simply pry this out of here. Alright, both pads have been removed from the caliper. This is the one that's on the actual piston side as a clip. Same kind of story. Real irregular deposition of material, regular surface, some chamfering at the edges. Anyway, next step, we're going to remove the Allen head bolt on the actual brake disc itself. And we're going to use a 6mm Allen head with a 3/8-inch drive breaker bar, and I've already loosened it. So once this bolt comes out, then we can remove the actual disc from the hub. Alright, now we're going to see if we can remove the disc. Remove the Allen head bolt, and again I used some type of penetrating oil first. Now it should come right off, but typically it'll seize against the hub. See if it comes right off. No, it's not going to come right off. So I've got a hammer, and we're just going to whack it. There it goes. Now we're going to remove the brake rotor. And before we offer up our new rotor, we're going to clean this surface. It's pretty clean. We'll clean it. Maybe put some copper grease on there. Alright, so now we're going to clean up the surfaces. We have some brake clean. Make sure that you use this in a well-ventilated area. It's nasty stuff. Now I've noticed here, thinking back, this brake rotor actually came off quite easily. And it's because someone put some anti-seize grease on there. So whoever worked on this last, thank you. So we're going to spray it down. Don't get it on the paintwork or anything, it'll eat it up. and just kind of clean up the surface. Make sure there's no corrosion or anything on here that's going to cause the brake disc to not seat properly against the hub. Just clean it up. Alright, here we have our replacement rotor, and before we offer it up to the hub, you want to clean it with some brake clean. Make sure that you remove any residue. Most brake rotors will have a coating of oil protected while it's sitting on the shelf before it arrives to the customer to prevent it from rusting. So you need to make sure that it's clean, because any rust that's left behind, or any oil that's left behind, will influence your braking ability severely. So you must clean it. Alright, so we've refitted our brake rotor to the hub. Put some anti-seize grease or some copper paste here, some brake pad paste. This is actually made by Mercedes, and I was told it was very efficient at stopping squeaking. Put a little bit of that on the hub, reattach the brake rotor, reattach the Allen head bolt to secure it to the hub. Now we've gone ahead and put some paste on the actual back of the brake pads here. We're just going to kind of smear the paste around, and this will hopefully help with any squeaking. And of course the squeaking is because the brake pad vibrates and transmits that vibration through the brake caliper into the vehicle, and you just hear it. So here's our new pad. See, it's quite a bit thicker than the previous pad we removed. You know, there was still some life left. You see these edges are already chamfered a little bit, so hopefully we won't have any squeaks with this one. So we're going to refit these into the brake caliper, and then we're going to remount the brake caliper on the hub. Alright, so we have the anti-vibration material, the anti-noise material on the pad. We're going to refit it into the caliper. And remember that this brake surface is now quite a bit larger, and you're going to have to compress the caliper to accommodate the extra size here. Also be careful when you're spraying this compound. Don't get any on the friction surface, because you don't want any oils on this friction surface whatsoever. This is the left-hand side of the vehicle, and depending on which vehicle you have, you'll see an extra wire here. And this wire goes to, it's a single wire, and it goes to basically what amounts to a sensor or just a contact that's on the brake pad. And as the brake pad wears down past a certain point, that contact is exposed and would hit the grounding point of the rotor, and that makes a circuit and it alerts you on the dash that your brakes are worn. So if you get that warning light, this will have to be replaced, because it's a wearable item. Once it wears down past, it grinds into a sensor, and then it's ruined. You actually have to have it replaced. And we're going to try to do this without having to replace it and salvage it. So I've disconnected these cables from the holding platform here. We've got the caliper off, we've got the brake rotor off. Notice I've already dressed it with anti-seize material. And we're going to go ahead and show you the disassembly again, just in case you missed it. So I can just kind of pry this pad out, away. There we go. I got this pad out. Again, you'll notice it's extremely worn. I mean, I've got probably about maybe 4.5, 5 millimeters here of pad, whereas a new pad is, you know, about that thick. So it's time to replace these. We have this clip, which I believe just kind of spins, tilts outwards like this. Yeah, just tilted and still in place. And now we can gain access to the other side. Let's see if I can get this pad out. There we go. Just kind of work this pad out of the piston. Okay. I'm going to flip the caliper over, and you can see the sensor. And basically the pad has a slot in the rear of it that holds the sensor. You see that slot? It's also present on that one. And now we're just going to try to gently get it out of there. It looks like I can probably grab it with some needle nose pliers and just pull it straight out, and we're going to try that. So we're going to remove this sensor. I've got a really tiny little flat head, and I'm going to hopefully go in through this side, get directly underneath the sensor, and maybe I can just twist it and pop it out. Here it comes, I think. Hopefully got it started. And come on. Need a larger flathead. Now I got it started. Twist it. And it wants to come out. And there it is. There's our sensor. I'm going to clean this up with some brake clean and remount it on the other brake pad. Sensor's removed, cleaned it up, it's ready to go back into the new pad. But first, we need to compress this piston back into the actual caliper. And if you look, any fears that I may have had about replacing my brakes too early are certainly can be disregarded, because look at the difference in the size. So because this new pad is so much thicker, there's not going to be room in the caliper for the two pads. You're going to have to squeeze the piston back in. I'll show you how to do that. Or maybe I'll leave the clip on. What we want to do is we want to slide out the bracket here, and it will come just fine, and get it free from the caliper. And this is one of the arms that the piston pushes into. And it's a good time now to go ahead and clean and inspect your slides here, the pins. And we'll just put some anti-seize grease or some copper grease back on these before we just put them back in. Now, to compress the piston, what I have is any old flat surface. I'll put that there. And I have a C-clamp. This and or type of C-clamp here. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to put it on the caliper here. There's not enough room. Open it up as far as it'll go in my case. There we go. And what we're going to do is when we tighten it up, it's going to push the caliper further into the piston. Here we go. We're going to tighten it. Tighten it some more. Very slow. Wait for a second. Tighten a little more. Wait for a second. And we're just pushing the caliper, the piston back into the caliper, and that'll create us more room to actually put the brake pads in around the new rotor. Alright, got the caliper reassembled here with the brake pads in place, with the piston retracted into the caliper, and now we simply need to fit this back onto the pad. Notice the sensor has a little square shiny metal bit that needs to face in towards the rotor, and this is basically going to clip on right there. Simple as that. Route it back through this rubber retaining clip that attaches onto the brake bleed nipple. And now this caliper is ready to go back onto the rotor. Simple as that. Now if we have compressed the piston back far enough inside of the caliper, then it will fit into the rotor just like that. Now we take our bolts and we'll just start to thread it back on. Now, look in your own workshop manual for the proper torque specifications. My workshop manual says these bolts need to be torqued to 81 foot-pounds. So make sure and use your torque wrench and get these torqued up properly. Then we'll just reattach the wheels and we're done. And hopefully, if you do this, and get rid of these bad old pads that are squeaky and worn out. Put some nice new rotors on every time you put nice new pads on. Do both sides of the vehicle. Next we're going to do the rear, but it's exactly the same as the front pretty much. Really simple, same concept, and hopefully you can save yourself some money. Be careful and have fun. One last thing, every brake pad and rotor assembly will need to be broken in. There'll be a bed-in procedure specific to your manufacturer of pads, and that absolutely must be followed. And remember that until that's performed, the brakes may not perform very well.